Okay, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here, and distinct honor to get to start this. And when I was thinking about rejuvenation and what we do, I also felt that there needs to be a rejuvenation, especially in terms of attitudes toward dance in the field of dance itself, in terms of the relationship to music. So, a couple of recent experiences that come to mind, and I want to just talk about that. Most recent was last weekend. A colleague of mine did a beautiful job. She's created a dance festival in Southern California. She just recently joined the faculty at Irvine. She danced with Joffrey and with Forsyth from Germany and Pennsylvania Ballet. So she has a lot of modern ballet connections. She was in the premiere of Rite of Spring and all that stuff. So she's able to put together a very nice festival in Laguna Beach. And so I went to the gala last Saturday night. And what I noticed at the gala was that this is a $150 ticket, which I didn't do. But the quality of the recordings, it was all recorded music, there was no live experience. It was all my greatest hits of the past this festival. It was something clearly unwritten. The quality of the recorded music was not uniformly, but mostly low. And so part of what I'm going to talk today about is a bit polemical, and I expect people to disagree passionately with some things I'm going to say, and I hope they will, or feel differently, and I'm putting some thoughts out there. The way it was horrible were some of the traditional ways that we've always laughed about. They had a beautiful couple doing a lot of from I believe it was from Sleeping Beauty. But the recording, we heard a chunk. This is an old sound. I haven't heard in a long time. We heard a chunk of a needle. And no, I think it's an old recording. They don't know where the CD is, or it could have been of the orchestra that used to play live with them, and that made a recording. They don't have a new digital version of it. So that's kind of charming. Yes, the dance is live. Oh no, we weren't watching film. We were actually live dancing. But then it was always the issue of volume, and that's a sore point with me in a lot of ways. And so I'll talk about that more fully. And it's not that there aren't aesthetic reasons why the music shouldn't be very loud, but I don't believe that those battles are always really fought through when they make these choices. And it drove half of the audience out. It was that loud. And these are the people who you need no money, who pay $150 a ticket. So sometimes you do need to make those accommodations. When I talked to the artistic director after it, I was very, she had worked so hard, she was exhausted, and I didn't really feel like, she also had the postal party right after. I just said, it was too bad, some of them were so loud. And she goes, yeah, I didn't have any, and nobody was there to set it up. Why didn't you ask me to do it? I would have done it for free, and I told her next year if she's helping us, I insist on finding out what to do. That's one story. One of my favorite stories, I was hoping Norman Beatty would be here, but he works with me at Irvine, and it's his story to tell. So I'll let him tell it, because it's very funny.
He should be here momentarily. He said he would be here by now.
Yeah, he's probably trying to figure out where everything is in Champaign. And so I'll just tell it briefly in that you should ask him about it later, because his story is a great version. He basically worked his butt off to do a score for an alum program who had started our own little company in San Diego. And he went down there, and in the theater, it turned out that there was no sound person, and one of the speakers was completely blown. So his entire experience of his music was played out of half the signal on one side of the house. And it was this poor young woman that was like, oh, isn't it okay we just do that? And I understand where that's coming from to a point. It's the fact that most artistic directors for small companies are costume designer, artistic director, doing all this other stuff. It's a culture of poverty. And so they're overwhelmed. day out to find this out. So Norman is really literally pulling the sound out of the south, trying to figure out what's going on. There are all sorts of classic anecdotes that I think how we all bonded for some of that several years was to tell our horror stories about teachers who wanted you to play before maybe only 3, and couldn't figure that out. All these sort of things that accumulate over time. So the basic premise of what I wanted to talk about today was essentially this, that I believe completely and passionately that the role of music in dance is significant and to be valued and treated with artistic and professional respect. And I think I'm in a room of people who all agree with me in that regard. But I also believe that dancers need to feel that way as well. And so what we can do, so this is about how, and this is really like the first draft of something I really want to address in the dance community, not just about something. You all already know everything I'm going to say. But that they need to feel that this is important. If they do not feel that this is important, we can only get so far what we want to do and where we want this collaboration to be. And but we will ultimately only get that far. And put it another way, if you are teaching a music or dance class that this is important and that you should, be conscious of the subdivision and all of the stuff, and so it needs to be musical. And you have a technique teacher who's not reinforcing that, or saying the opposite of that. This is a dance major, it's not a music major. And they are going to either be conflicted over that, either have to feel that they have to take sides, or secretly agree with you and then just kind of get through the program. But so they're putting it in. The other side of the coin is anything I say that goes along these lines means extra work for the dancer. And so I want to couch it, I want to be challenging about it. But I also want to provide some sort of, I want to be empowering about it. Because what we can do is provide tools for them to own it in a different way. And so I do have a handout I'm going to pass out in a second. I distributed it on the web because they were talking about this, something I've been using for years. And so I finally went back and edited it, cleaned it up, and looked at it, and thought, no, that doesn't make sense anymore. A little handout I use in a pedagogy class. So I think where can we have this impact? Well, in the university setting, we do get to teach people. And so part of this presentation is about what do I do to empower these grad students, and I focus really on grad students in this case, but it also works with undergraduates, to be their own music director. And then the other side of it is to talk about what an artistic director can do to be their own music director. Now when I say their own music director, I'm not trying to belittle our role, and I don't think we will. And in some ways, the more that when you have colleagues in the dance who really care about music, really know a lot about music, your job actually gets a bit harder. Because you have to live up to a set of standards that are very high, and you really have to pay attention to what you're doing because they're paying attention to what you're doing. And that's healthy for us, and it's necessary, and it's wonderful. But it doesn't at all ever really reduce our role. There are very few algorithms, and people who are like Bob, who do their costume design, do their set design, do their own scores, and do that. So we're still going to be part of it. So what we offer is another point of view, another way to address these things. So over time, I'm just feeling that the more concerts I go to, the less interested I start to become in the music choices that I'm seeing choreographers make, and I'm more and more concerned about the kind of choices our students are making about music, or what the relationship is to do. The dance teacher is the person that a dance student is going to look to for their cues about the relationship. So, the other kind of anecdote is the story about the dance teacher who loves you. That was beautiful. Wasn't that gorgeous? And did you listen to what you did for the teacher who never acknowledges that you were there? Because the message that I worry about there is that the students see that is their relationship. My favorite has always been when I used to play for the now defunct ballet Pacifica now and then. That's a long, sad, and sordid story if anybody wants to pay that over a year. And that's a local, pretty good, it was a pretty good regional ballet company in Southern California. They had this remote that you wore on your wrist where you could control the CD player from there. So when they had live music, they'd forget, they'd come over, and they tried to turn me off. I thought it was something very weird until I found out what it was. So this is finally revised after many years. Sure, it's of course over here.
So I got a question, Alan, which is, are you, it has less to do with actual the question is, are you kind of suggesting a paradigm for playing class where you recommend that we go through as many different ways of playing to the dance as opposed to really good one particular. In other words, really change from exercise to exercise. The way you attach yourself to that movement.
No, I'm not necessarily advocating one way. What I'm really advocating is that the dancer needs to more fully investigate what their relationship is to music and own it and be able to communicate with that is. And so it's going to depend, in other words, it's going to depend on the person you're working with and their ability to communicate with you, how they do it, and what they do.
I guess, I don't know if I said it right. I guess what I'm saying is, sometimes teachers, graduate students, especially those, they relate to sound or music in one way. They haven't investigated the other complexity of the relationship between sound and music. And so when they're teaching, they're really almost always looking for that same way. And then the example that they're providing for the students is, oh, this is the way to relate to, which is exactly what you were saying. And sometimes it's difficult. Actually, it isn't difficult, but sometimes it's difficult to say that, hey, look, I'm trying to vary the ways to make the answer clear that there are varying ways in terms of how we. So give these things a chance. And if there's something that I do that you really despise, but I have to try to vary ways because that's part of
absolutely.
Educating.
And I think one of the great challenge here is educating our colleagues on this, which is really what I think we're more engaged in a lot. We're even now as grad students or as undergraduates. And I know that not everybody here works with grad and undergrad, but most of us do. So I'm just talking from my experience. At least we can tell them that they need to start doing that. But I do feel that it is that dancers learn about music from their dance teachers. And I think that's something we have to acknowledge and understand. And we are there too. And we have a lot to offer them in terms of that kind of information. Sometimes we're engaged with it, sometimes we're not engaged with it, depending on their style, etc. And so this is important. And I quit jobs where we can just, musically despair. And for that reason, and it's nice to have that luxury. I don't always have that luxury. The great caveat to all of this is that we're still trying to earn money. Dance teachers are still trying to earn money. They only have so much time in a technical class to do all these things, and I understand that. So after I go through all of these things that you should do, the students usually feel very overwhelmed, and then if you turn to it later, well, we have to do it all on the first day. And that we're talking about your professional development. And the reason I think that, when I say own, the more fully a dancer owns their relationship to music, I think the more fully formed they are professional. And I also, when I say that, I'm speaking about a very open relationship. There are dancers who really do not work with musical scores beyond environmental sound. And that's fine if they understand that, and that's where they're coming from. That are ways of empowering and ways of getting teachers to another level. So with the grad students, I basically lay out 3 levels of being a music director. And at the first level, there's a 0 level. The 0 level is basically you teach your class and you pray that the musician knows what you're doing. You never talk to them, interact with them. And I actually rarely ever had that experience. I remember years ago, I was playing in Connecticut and we brought in somebody from New York who was clearly terrified because they'd never had a live musician play for them ever. And they were like nervous about it. And I actually wielded no power in this situation. I was, just an hourly guy coming to play this sort of thing. And I would basically, and so he felt he would try to overcompensate by telling me what he wanted, which was completely at odds with what he actually demonstrated. So I had to make him a little smart by playing what he demonstrated, because then he would say, "Oh, that was great, yeah," and then we would go from there. And so it was, but that really doesn't happen. But I really expect the students to own, at least at the basic level, a sense of what their time is. Knowing what their time is. Knowing how to communicate that sense of time to their students, as well as to the live musician, or knowing what the time is. And I want to modify these comments to talk about preparing for the teacher. Because I want our grad students to go out demanding live music wherever they teach class. And by that, I try to hire good enough musicians where they see value of it. And so I think that's important. And they do usually feel that way. But the reality is that most of them will be working for music. And when I talk to, we have a lot of alums who are teaching at community colleges and some at other institutions. It's been very exciting to see that. But I see them all at ACPA bases like that. They have this year. I'm now teaching. They're all saying the same thing. We'd love to have one to get a budget for it, and what can we do? So the reality is that they're still going to be prepared for it. So at the basic level, what do they know about the music they're choosing in terms of how it's phrased, how it's counted, and all that stuff? And can they do more to ensure that they do that? So the first bullet point really addresses the type of movement that requires what we think of as meter, pulse, and subdivision, and all those important things. But obviously, there are movements that really work on them. So I don't want to forget to mention that. And so what I do is I usually have 1/5 of the pedagogy class. I teach this in pedagogy class. But then I have an additional quarter of what's called musical resources, which no one was ever able to tell me what that meant. So for me, after trying many different things, I've settled on essentially a cultural history of the United States from 1900. And so basically, because people are very destitute in terms of their relationships to literature. They know so little literature. And you always see the first year music choices are always so different from the second year choices. So that's something to do with that. And so it's pretty much literature review. And it also gives them, and the other thing that musicians get more of because of at least the traditional classical training, we get more history along with the music lessons than dancers do. We have more of a relationship with our repertoire for practical reasons. And so I get to talk about it in musical resources class, aesthetic battles that were being waged, to give them ideas as choreographers as well, to give them what were the futures in the 20s, what was Dada, all these sort of things, which hopefully they've done somewhere else, but it gives me a chance to touch base on that stuff as well. So that's why I call it cultural history, even though I really look at the points of music for the most part. Okay, and then right from the start I talk about interaction with the musician. The other way that dancers pick up on their relationship to music is how does the teacher interact and relate to a musician in the classroom? How do you ask them to change something? How do you work this? Do you ever talk before class to actually give them a heads up on certain things? I really appreciate that. To so the first 2 or 3 classes I go through all of my bullet points. And then everybody has to teach, and I'm their co-host. And that's really just fun for me because I just try to be as bad of a co-host as I possibly can. And surprisingly. And then,
how do you do that?
well, I mean, sometimes it's just over the top. I'll read a paper and ignore them. So I deal with professional issues as well.
Separate out.
Yeah, it's actually.
I see it demonstrating 1, 2, 3, and I just automatically go to that intermittent, and so it's hard for me to do.
Yeah, so then I have to make how I have to decide consciously how I'm going to screw it up. And then I have to force myself. We're so habituated to like playing exactly what we want. And then it's all about the language. How do you get me, how do you get me on board, at least with just times like that. So that theme is throughout this whole presentation. At the second level, I just want to teach the students or the teachers to have command of the musical style. Go beyond rhythm and tempo, things like that. I start knowing repertoire. Start knowing, being able to give more specific information. At this point, I usually make them all make an annotated class report. If I had had more wherewithal, I would have actually brought them with me to give you an example, but I'll just post one online. I'll ask the students, okay, I'll post it. And what they do is they pick all their selections, they describe the combination, and then they describe everything they can about the music in terms of style that they know. I know they wrote a notes. Hey, I've done it and I've been late for class and I haven't talked about Shostakovich. Remember his bass? Well, let's see if you want to know. Okay. That's our work. But then they have to break down the phrasing runs, like why are you using this choice and stuff like that. And then, so they all have to prepare for the type of class they want to teach. And some of them are clear on how to teach ballet, some of them are modern teachers, and I do have jazz teachers in there as well. So this is where, I learned a lot about dance company from people in this room and from dance teachers who took the time to go. I found out after playing ballet for about 5 or 6 years, I started at American Dance Festival, and I never knew until that I was doing that I should cadence on 7, like 4 bars. No one ever told me. Everybody was fine about that, and now we need to talk. And so I think, but it was for Jim Sutton, who was a wonderful man, a wonderful musical teacher, who really helped me understand better than anybody else had about the difference between, in the ballet context, the difference between a mazurka and a waltz. And so he talked about the emphasis being down, and the mazurka on the second beat, and up, and the waltz on the first beat. And to the extent that it's true or not, I know that no one has ever corrected me for any mazurka that I've improvised since that time and said that's not a mazurka. So I know at least it's functionally valuable, the information that it would give me. I love it when a teacher will take a moment. If I play something out of Giselle for a class, or Raimondo, or something like that, the teacher will stop and go, oh, you know ballet this is from. What happens? And then they'll tell a little bit of the story right at that moment. I just think that's part of it. So it's also starting to own your own repertoire and its history and its knowledge of it. And so I can go through all of these stories. I'm just giving this out to you as what I do. Yes, ma'am.
And you have teachers who stop and say, that is holy music. Never come back.
Well, I have I've had teachers say, oh Lord, I never want to hear this thing anymore again. And I respect that. Yeah. Although, it depends on the age of the students. If you've got 13 or 14-year-olds, it's nice to play Nutcracker because they'll recognize it and get excited because they're thinking about being someplace if there's a regional ballet company. So having that conversation with the teacher is very important. The bottom line for me is that what I've discovered, this is something on the side, is that I don't worry about playing too much literature anymore. I'm a little lazy about it, frankly. But it's really mostly about the amount of energy I inject into what I'm doing. So I usually improvise on the entire ballet class at this point. And I've played enough literature along the way to know how to stay tonal and how to stay tonal, or how to do fake bar talk and all that other stuff. But it's about the amount of passion I inject is really what a good teacher is striving for. Being able to talk about the Bible, being able to give musicians clear information about the way things stretch, information, the fact that men, you need to slow down when you leave struggle or leave across the floor, all that sort of stuff is information that they should be able to communicate. And the teacher should be able to direct to the musician and start to inform the musician. Let's see. All right, let's go on. And here's where, what the English Society is that they take ownership of the education from their students, the education of the students. There are many ways they can do that. Making sure they can talk about it in class, asking the students to their input and feedback on what they're hearing, inviting a student, who's sophisticated enough to get it to come in. You're going to bring the music next, and you're going to bring a recording of what you'd like to use for this combination. That can be risky. So you have to be thoughtful and careful about it. But having the power as the dance teacher to be able to control that environment in that way. And the other part of this is to be able to train a musician yourself to play for you. And that's very challenging for most dance teachers to do that. And so I really value that. Let me get more and more into professionalism and what, there is a bottom line about money and going on here and all this. So I lay all this stuff out for the students at this point, and they usually come, they're at the moment, yes, we really believe in this, but that means I'll spend like 10 minutes dancing in class. And that's not really what I mean at all. It was, one of my great handicaps as a musician for my entire life has been my inability to play jazz. But one of the most comforting things I realized is that most jazz musicians learn how to play jazz one tune at a time. And so you learn a tune, and then don't worry about being a jazz musician, you just learn how to play the tune. And that was a very comforting thing. And it took me 20 years to figure that out. Even though people told me that. So this is about your professional development. These are about goals that you might reach over a long period of time as a teacher. Why do I think it's important and why do I think it's valid? I think it's valid because I rarely go to a dance concert that doesn't have music. In fact, the last one I think I went to was an Iko concert at ADF. And that's my most embarrassing story that I ever have to tell about myself. That my cousin had given me a watch. And the watch had pushed this button and said, "Mom, the time is 9:50." And then I go to a concert, stretch, like that, bomb. And it was about 48 minutes in. And, afterwards I thought about how cool that was. To watch this piece when time was really suspended and I informed exactly how long it had been going on. At the time, it was pretty much hell. It was like dropping a stone in water and it just kind of goes to that one. It was like every head in the house just
Did they cut the piece short?
They weren't.
Head close to
Yeah.
that.
So I've done it again. So this is all about, so these are some of the basic points here. So this is the handout I wrote with grad students in a pedagogy class. So I feel that one place where we have a chance to really make this impact is as teachers, as working with people who are learning how to teach. And finding relationships with people who are already professional. The scary thing for a lot of people, for us, for any dancer, to suddenly get the job. It's not exploring ones that suddenly they're very scared that they're actually supposed to be in command of a situation, and that they should already know all this stuff. We all know that this is really tough, and it takes a long time to get to that place where they feel confident in that sort of thing. And and that's where interesting style first comes out. Some people overcompensate and become commandos, and they really cut you down. Other people will have the courage to ask for help. And so you have opportunities with teachers. And I think at universities it's probably really difficult because you're running with faculty, what the relationship with your colleagues is, vote on your files and things like that. And how you develop those relationships can be very challenging. I have to say, in all honesty, I'm very lucky about the place I ended up in because I came into an environment that, basically written into its original bylaws that as much teaching as possible needed to be done by music. So they never cut the budget. And any of those technically my position didn't appear when the person prior to me left it. Those things, so it's been easy for me in that regard. I don't have anybody who doesn't buy into it amongst my colleagues. But I've encountered it elsewhere as well. So I have to say, it's been easy. And so sure, it's one thing for me to say, but you're not working where I am. And I understand that. And I want to be sensitive to that. Some people really don't want to hear from me. And you want to help. And that's unfortunate. And because of economic reality, that you just figure out how to live with it. And you just try to be the best position you can be, and then hopefully some of that will feed into the environment. So I want to acknowledge all these different environments and I'm painfully aware of the practical realities of the situation. I have also the unusual situation to my advantage, of course, and to hopefully use this advantage of being the chair. This is my 7th year as the chair of the department. So I'm certainly not going to fire any musicians. And I'm certainly going to raise their salaries so they are competitive. I'm not being ridiculous about these things. And I'm certainly addressing the issues of music curriculums. But it also gave me a much healthier position in my relationship, in the dance's relationship to the music department. And in fact, for 2.5 years I was chair of the music department, as well as the dance department, because they have no one. So I have an enviable position in that regard. That I have the respect from the music department that some people don't usually get. When I got this job at Irvine, the director of Easton, who was no longer there, said, well, let me know when you want a real job. But it is a real job. And he wasn't there. Okay, so I was just thinking of ripping off pop culture as much as I can. So I came up with 7 habits of a musical dance teacher. One is to notice the music. What does that mean? You actually hear it. You actually remember what you've heard. And then from there, obviously, the 2 follows. You talk about it at least once in a class. These are things you could do on a daily basis. This is what I mean by habits. So how can you implement all of this rigmarole that I dump on your shoulders? And not feel overwhelmed? Just little things that you can do as a general habit that could really be helpful to you. My favorite comment, and I actually wrote it in my own syllabus for music for dance, is this whole class is about what does it mean when a teacher says to you, be more musical. You hear that all the time. And a lot of teachers say it. It's not musical. You're dancing is musical. But, a freshman is not going to learn that. So demonstrate. And just point out the difference between a musical arm based on the musical phrase that's going with it and one that's not working. So they can see it. If you really want to work at this, make a point. And this is for me too. Listen to something you've never heard before, at least once a week. And if you really want to be good about this, and I wish I was, keep track. Keep track. One of the reasons why the whole idea of this point of view for this presentation came to mind was that when I first started getting involved in dance, and also just a reflection on changing my own, having accumulated a lot of information over time. stuff at Bologna with rock, with stuff that was really cool, unusual, strange, really fun, different. And to this day, I'm still trying to find this recording of Richard Goldhughes, the Guatemalans playing British band music. Even though there hadn't been anybody in Guatemala for 50 years to teach them how to do it. So it had evolved into this other thing. It was so extraordinary. And I don't have that experience very often in my dance class. And there's a little screen at the end of the next page, which I'll get to in a second. And it's totally screen. And everybody will have something to add to it, something they'll disagree with me about.
When Richard Gold died, did anyone?
I don't really know. I don't have stuff. There was no sense of an archive of this stuff. And I don't really even know more than I would.
They erased it because part of that.
He said erase.
There was this huge battle in the huge schism, and the losers went off bloody in the state. Those kind of things.
Yeah.
So there was no talk. He was named nomination when I was in my category. So, what?
It depends on which camp you're in.
Yeah. Three camp state.
Identify, I think a combination of teaching. There's music absolutely love for it, and it works great. One thing that always comes to mind is Rama and the music from Romeo and Juliet. Force yourself to go find something else, especially if it's something you love. And ask a musician to help you. I'm better now than you have a consultant here, ready, willing. You want to hear something you've never heard before? Ask the musician, bring you a recording you're begging to know. They probably have. So we are here, we are present in all of these places. Dare to let the music be quiet. This is also motivated by having to be an administrator and to constantly replace the stereo around the studios where our shoot floor, where the tap classes, where they're always competing for sound, but also the jazz classes where they love class. Okay, it's not healthy. And I think that, and that point comes back again when we talk about the 7 habits of musical and artistic or choreography. And invite your students to do all these things. So I've talked mostly about pedagogy and dance teaching and dance students, but I really, these things also call artistic direction. Okay, collaborate with musicians and trust your collaborators. I feel very strongly about this one because I've had people over my shoulder when I'm in a MIDI studio trying to assemble their score. No, do this now. And invariably, they'll end up hating what we end up producing together. And I want to start one. But allow these person, if it's a real collaborator, they're going to bring ideas that you haven't brought to the table. With students, very often something that I end up doing a lot of. I do write a lot of scores for students, and very often, because we are 100% compliant with copyright law, or trying to be, students will find out a week or two before the show that they couldn't get copyright, they can't use the music that they use for whatever reason. Students do much better if they ask. They get much better results than the institution has. So we know
That's important.
it's very important, and I even bring it back as a second bullet point. But then what happens is, what I tell a student, or what I tell any choreographer, is, especially if I know they're already married to another score, is that you can say no to this. You can't say no to it until you've done it 5 times. And so don't listen to it the first time the dancers do it, they'll hate it. It won't be the same. They've gotten used to the habits that will inspire them. And the great thing about choreography is how much more malleable it is than film. And that they can adjust their timing to these subtle changes. And that's what makes it very exciting. When you go to a rehearsal, when a musician goes to the rehearsal, they're taking time out to go, and this drives me crazy. One of my closest friends and colleagues gets so caught up in their movement constantly making editing changes. They will edit all the way up through the final rehearsal of the work. But if they forget I'm there, even though they've asked me to come to the rehearsal, and I have to ask them really important questions about how long, what kind of sounds are good, some of that, and they forget they're there. Oh, could you go over there? And I'm like, hello? So, hey, give that collaborator your full attention. That's what it means to trust as well. As a music director or artistic director or a choreographer, keep your dancers listening. Change the music. Break them out of their habits. One of the things that was very interesting for me, I had a chance to do a score for a Complexions Contemporary Ballet where I was going to be an improvised score for the most part. And so what we ended up doing was generating 5 versions of it. So, and the teacher, and the choreographer would just essentially at random pick one of the versions, just to keep them alive and aware of how things would be when they live performance takes, to be ready and open. They should be excited by live music. They shouldn't be fearful of it. I think that's a choreographer or artistic director's job is to get them there. And the way they do that is to look forward to something unexpected. Changing the music as a habit, as a ritual, as opposed to marrying that one CD where it becomes almost tantamount after a while to that same material. As a choreographer, as a director, you should see a lot of different work. Mary Oliver, in her book on writing poetry, said, I'm going to tell you some things, but really the most important thing you can do is read a lot of poems. And I think a choreographer just needs to see a lot of work, and they need to immerse themselves in it and think about what they see. And be excited about it. That's true for just choreography, not just the music. Pay attention to them. What did you like about the way they use the music or didn't use the music? Respect copyright. Be generous with your program information. I hate it when, and I see this at ADF, and it's the company, visiting companies, will not acknowledge even who the composer was. I saw Philadelphia they used Ray Paul Williams' Green Sleeves dance. Or no, Thomas Tallis dance. Beautiful swingers recently. No mention of it, but why they didn't do that is because they probably didn't have copyright permission to use that. And because ASCAP and BMI don't actually send reps to our concerts, they just collect the programs.
Or they got it from some design pod,
Yeah, and they don't know what it is. Even worse. That's really pretty stuff. Is it from a movie? And that's how they make those choices. Give the same attention to the music, quality of recording, volume, playback, instrumental maintenance. Is the piano that the poor pianist is playing, is it in tune? God forbid, we should even think about that. And also about an issue. But they give that same attention to the costumes and lighting. Costumes that, I remember Randy James sitting in his car from the Ohio Theater here the night of the concert I had given the score to. He was stitching his costumes in the car, getting them ready to go. So I understand the physical realities here. But, the music should have that same respect and that same concern to the extent that they're able to do so. Derelict music choir. It is really hard in the year 2007 for a dance on a stage that is separated by the invisible fourth wall to really grab an audience and shock them. But you can with really loud music. Or if you throw things on the stage and literally reach into the audience. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying that the way audiences are conditioned right now, and the way we absorb information, and our shock value, our shock rate is really high. And so, wanting to have an impact with movement that's not immersed amongst the audience is very difficult. And so very often we turn to music to that effect. I believe that people are fearful that if the music is quiet, that audiences won't be engaged, which I don't think is true.
It's just like somebody in the stage.
Yeah.
And I saw
just like the day before, put it onto the video, put it into the format that it's going to be in, and there's no time to do anything about it. So,
Especially when they
they have to synchronize the video, and there was no time to redo it.
Yeah, the video artist that works at our department basically said never get anything that more than -12, which is low for if the DVDs don't get the video again support at the same time. And the sound issues got so it's great.
It's one of the things too, as you say, I agree with search. Everybody said it is. I agree with the search, what happens when there's a recording. Well, I don't hear anything around it. It's like, you're just irritated. It's not about the audience. You're just irritated.
You're just sensitive.
No, please. I've done this enough times that I know the audience is saying, you're this.
They won't tell
Especially
you
when
you're
you're
right,
asked for
they
it.
don't like the piece.
Especially when it's a photo family, sometimes it's that, a huge rack of speakers above the head, out into the house.
And so, essentially, at this point, my message is that it's clear that music is still playing an essential role. Take ownership of it. Use us as your best consultants to help you with this. You will grow as an artist. And this is you being the dance performance. You will grow as an artist and stuff like that. So the rant at the bottom is just the habits that choreographers have very often fallen into because it's easier. And so everything on here can be used appropriately, but I really want to believe that they came to it through this sound aesthetic and passionate thought, so, and Yvonne Rainer wrote very famous in the respective, so I thought I'd just kind of rip off her. Say no to film scores. Film scores are the latest hot property for choreographers, and they can be quite good for dance scores, but they, a film score is all about telegraphing the emotional landscape of whatever it is that they're working with. So try to move beyond
I
that.
want to disagree with you right now.
See, good.
I work with high school kids, and I suppose some different with undergrads. But they don't have musical resources. I mean, they don't have any sense of radio or iPod. And now they have the movies and movies. And both my teaching partner and I insist that they not make very strong suggestions that they not use music as words to. And then oftentimes the only place to go to is musical scores. And there's a wonderful musical score to Amelie, and John Zorn has done a whole series of
And the one
film scores that are fabulous. They're wonderful. Like, can you get permission to use them?
mostly,
Mostly not.
Most of them.
Most of them don't even have.
I actually called up John Ford to have permission for one of my students. And Mark Burwell has been very good.
We've had no luck with Bernard Herrmann.
And the reason that I agree about this is our employer try to encourage no film scores, but because
I think when it was
proposals represent a significant portion of the creative, of the most creative composition people in the country. It seems.
I put it on here because I think most of our students at this point think of classical music as folk music, and that's what they think of it as. And so I guess that was the agenda behind it. But I see a lot of film scores now. It's when they go to the cheese that I just start getting a little irked, and I think they could make better choices. So again, everything on here, there is a valid reason for disagreeing with the film. And I competition very often. I made an informal rule at UCI from 1996 until about 2003 that no Toreos. Because the choreographer couldn't help but act out the song. They'd even wear jeans and a white t-shirt and be the victim on stage. Or they just, it's the song they had it. And so that was a running joke for me. The Falls River Seasons, actually, I haven't seen it for a long time. That used to be, Red and Red Honey Bells Canon. Honey Bells Canon. Although I haven't seen many dances. So I just listed 3 pieces that get way over choreographic imagination to make things. There was a duet I saw at Joffrey where they used some romantic opera lines, but they would constantly get to their climax before the music would get to the climax, and it was this really fun counterpoint. But mostly, it's like, what do you do, you know, when everything's roaring and cymbals are flashing like that? It's an over-the-top kind of sound, but it's really hard to equal on the stage. So you either have to be treated ironically, or necessarily, I was asked, well, what should I do at this moment? And I said, I think the stage should be empty. And he thought I was like, you're crazy, you know, but I was sincere in that recommendation. And so really, the way I get around pissing anybody off is just to say, these choices are often made because they're easier, or because you're worried about your audience liking what you're going to do. Well, there's all sorts of reasons to do that. You should know those reasons, at least.
But coming back to this thing about all of these things that you're doing here, I mean, I think it's really easy now because the accessibility is so much easier here to say, well, you know, this Carmen Beretta is a lot of people use it. Well, why don't you go to horror and maybe find another piece by
Or just
why don't you go search it and find out who wrote the music for Amelie?
If you search Carmina Burana on Amazon.com, the next time you go to Amazon.com, the people who bought Carmina Burana also bought it. I've actually bought one most of it, and I would have never thought about that. I really like it. So it bothers me that I'm a tool of mass marketing, but something that.
Okay, so big picture, this is what you use for graduate students who are teaching pedagogy, right?
And this is what these principles that I try to bring to any collaborative experience I have with choreographer as well. I don't necessarily read them over running. I try to set down some ground rules, but I try to break into the
The real problems that we have out there are with the real experienced teacher, with the faculty, or whoever is really teaching them. Another presentation that would be great is the subtlety of teaching students from the camp, you know, from what you're playing in class. That's a huge teaching tool. What they're hearing in class is huge in their learning. So that's for the students and for the teachers. How do you teach the teachers who are already there in faculty positions? How do you, as a musician, playing in class or whatever, teach, encourage their learning, encourage their growth in what they use in music, and encourage everything?
Well, and I think it's very important for people teachers, whether they're on faculties or in private schools like that, to ever build any kind of mechanism for any kind of professional training. It usually stops because they have a full-time job just trying to, if you have your own studio, you know, this is one component of their profession. And even though, you know, I'm focusing on here, I have to get them to embrace that as a component of their professional development. And so if I can make some sort of way, you know, thinking about the 7 habits thing, it's just an idea I have about, well, what can I give them as a tool that will help them but won't overwhelm them? It's like, okay, I need to lose weight, so I am now going to eat 1,500 calories a day, and then every 3 days, screw this, and, you know, go order a steak somewhere. And so it's that kind of mentality, like figuring out how to break a single habit over time and then add to those habits. And so these are some habits I'd like to add to that list. But it is about professional development. And they have to work not only to see dance, to think about choreography, not just to learn music and stuff like that. They have there's a lot of room for that for us as well as for them. So this is just kind of a dry run with some ideas I'd like to present more back into the dance community while we still have a little
Well, it's a great list of things. I really very much appreciate you always asking me to come in and talk about music and this is something she's been looking for.
Well, everybody's welcome to it, yeah.
I'm going to set further whether you would publish this in the field journal and then, you know, make it available to dance teachers. It's a way of teaching the dance teachers.
Sure.
In a way that might help them if you.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of this is to put a point of view out there. For them to embrace it.
There was something similar in the earlier journal.
But this
dance musicians and dance teachers work together.
Because once you get something published, they can find picked up, like the dance teachers have their own organizations, and this is some way to spark a conversation so that they're not embarrassed, so that they'll deal with it too. We're talking about the old dance teacher.
Well, I'm thinking of dance teacher now, actually, in the periodical.
Yes.
There's something about it.
Yes, yes, there is.
I just wanted to address something that Bill was saying, you know, how do we help the existing teachers use this information or encourage them to think about it this way? I guess my thinking of that is that many of them may not be open to it. So I feel that my charge as a dance educator is to start where I'm teaching and demand a pedagogy class, that as long as they're in this class, and then we need to do whatever. I do teach the pedagogy class, and very similar things. And I feel this is the next generation that can take this information and go out. I'm not saying give up on the people that are already teaching, I'm just saying.
No, but sometimes
It will be a challenge.
they might respond to a colleague of theirs who is more
Right.
capable and ask them.
I mean, those teachers aren't even going to look at this. But I think there are teachers that won't even.
Or I think they're fine.
They're not aware that because they're not interested in development, they're not interested in developing their teaching.
Going back to the question of economics, which we talked about earlier, is there any evidence to back up the statement that there's something that says that our budget can't handle live music, blah, blah, blah? Is there any research studies or anything that validates the statement that over the long term, if you have live music, you will have more students?
I don't know.
You will have what?
More students.
If you have live music, so the live music is a full, if you're asking a question, live music a full of selling point.
That would be very interesting.
I doubt.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know anything.
No, I'm not talking about an individual musician by any means. I'm talking about a department.
Yeah, it's
Or a
those
student.
listings where they're trying to encourage people to listen to their partners. Yes, that's always a starting point.
No, I'm talking about a research study that
Yeah.
has looked at that, I mean, that economic fact. Because the studio that I started dancing at eliminated live music because of supposedly the budget couldn't handle it. It was the teacher got paid, the musician got paid. And they're about the same time that they got rid of the musicians was about the same time that the studio started going down. And,
Well, I do know that studios market it if they do have live music. I don't believe that there's ever been a formal study of that. It's going to be very useful to have it done. Probably good one.
I just wanted to go back to the idea of educating the existing teachers, because that is a big issue. And I just started at a new school, and I'm doing the state of the music program address in one of the faculty meetings, and I'm asked to do this. And one of the first comments that I'm making is a thank you. And I'm listing things, I just wrote down things as people, I have five different teachers, 5 or 6, and I wrote down things as I remember. So I wrote down whenever somebody mentioned the name of, the ballet in class, or said, oh, did you hear that music? Chattanooga teacher does great with those conferences or something. I wrote it down, and then I'm just giving that as a list and saying, thank you for every time you did this. And I think that that's a diplomatic way of people going, oh, other people